Hello and welcome to An Introduction to Social Policy by Dr. Nick Wilmore. This first part offers an introduction to the subject and an overview of the 7 clips that make up this lecture series. Hello, my name is Nick Wilmore and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be talking about social policy. I'm going to be looking at how it's been developed, a brief look at what social policy is, how it might be created or how it might evolve in a society, how social policy is then implemented, and finally wrapping up with discussion around social work and social policy. After all, these sessions are aimed at those of you who are studying on a variety of social work courses. This discussion about social policy is intended as a single lecture which takes just over an hour. Now I recognise that's too long for most people to sit at a screen watching particularly some dry old academic material. So what I've done is I've split it up into a number of sections which you can watch in the time that suits you. You can break it up and have a bit of a break from my noise. So please do follow through the logic of the sessions, but feel free to dip in if actually what you're looking for is something specific to support a particular piece of work that you're doing. So let's start talking about what is social policy and how is it developed. Peter Alcock, who has recorded a slot here on YouTube, talks about social policy as promoting or delivering welfare and well-being for people or citizens. That's quite a wide range of subjects, of issues being covered. So you can understand right away why social policy is so important when we are looking at how a society governs itself. Policy is a description of government actions. You could say it's almost been around since the start of recording using writing. When we think about early writings setting out the expectations a community might have of its religious or government leaders. I think the first recorded example of social policy in what we might consider a more modern form would have been in the 6th century, when one of the early Islamic states started setting out what it would do for its community, what they might expect of their government. If I was then going to fast forward, in the United Kingdom, which of course is my particular interest, it really started as Victorian reformers tried to describe the changes needed to create a better society, whether that was about poverty reduction, whether it was prison reform, the abolition of slavery, better housing, and ultimately primary education. So the Victorian reformers really started taking it into quite a wide range of different areas of our community and setting out what they understood to be the right values, expectations a citizen might have of their government, but also starting to talk about how that should be delivered. It's all very well to say we are looking to reduce poverty, but you then needed to start understanding how that was going to happen. And certainly when you look at the work of the early economists, that's what they were trying to do. Moving on a bit, we then look at the post-war contract, which these days we now call the welfare state. So we talk about the development of the National Health Service. We talk about social care, both of which in 1948 were given a major step forward. We talk about housing, we talk about poverty, and ultimately national insurance leading to the pension scheme that we all now have an expectation of, albeit that has now significantly changed. And I think what we're seeing in just looking at where those policy elements were back in 1948, 1950, you can see straight away that it's an evolving situation. Social policy is not set in stone. It's not like Einstein's theories, which are pretty much there, albeit being improved, being refined over time. With social policy, it's much more about actually how, as a community, do we expect to be led and governed. We then move into the new right, which is starting to make some of those big changes. In the 1970s, 80s, the discussion was about pulling back the big state, that there was an overreach in the UK. This led to the introduction of capitalist mechanisms for service delivery. And we're talking about things like the outsourcing of public services and a focus on individual responsibility. And it starts then the real debate about actually, is the appropriate policy individuals who look after themselves and the role of families to look after each other? Or is it something where the state steps in? And if it does, at what point? Is it where the state steps in to help the most vulnerable individuals who have no support mechanisms? Or is it a wider responsibility to set the framework in which we all live and which we all gain an element of support from? And this is very wrapped up into this whole concept of the public and private goods. Through all of this, UK has very much been seen as one of the initiators of social policy. Not so much in terms of how it fits in terms of government, but more as a subject of academic discussion, and one that has since been adopted much more globally. At this point, I will note that some US commentators use the term social welfare policy rather than just social policy. But we are talking about many of the same sort of principles, but being a different community, being a society that has different expectations, that policy itself is quite different.